All right, here we go. We're really doing good. We're going to keep going through this. This is awesome. All right, going through page 20 here. So Socrates says you got to know people. You got to know your audience, the soul, the psyche, the mind of who you're talking to if you're going to work with words. And he's talking about speechwriters, but everybody works with words. All right, so let's take a look here. Okay. His whole effort is directed at the soul, for in that he seeks to produce conviction, right? Anybody working with words is thinking about souls, because it's only in the soul and the mind that you produce conviction. That's belief. Then clearly Thrasymachus or anyone else who teaches rhetoric in earnest, seriously, will give an exact description of the nature of the soul, which will enable us to see whether she be single and the same, or, like the body, multiform. This is what we should call showing the nature of the soul. So, like anybody who teaches you about speeches better also be able to teach you about souls, about minds, about people, about psychology, about the truth of human nature. Exactly. He will explain, secondly, the mode in which she acts or is acted upon. Right? We got to understand souls and how they are affected, and how they affect other things. True. Thirdly, having classified men and speeches and their kinds and affections, and adapted them to one another, he will tell the reasons of his arrangement and show why one soul is persuaded by a particular form of argument and another not. You've hit upon a very good way. So you have to understand people, and you have to understand why is this person like this kind of argument and this person likes another kind of argument. This is probably a little bit more complicated than we really need for this class, but there's lots of different ways to make an argument. Now, in this class, I teach you to quote things and put the quotes in your own words and give examples. But there's lots of different ways to convince an audience to do things. For example, you can use fear. A lot of politicians will make everybody scared, because if you're scared, you listen to them and do what they say to make the fear go away. That's a kind of play on emotion. It's called pathos, is when you try to affect somebody by using their emotions. Other people, logic. You use statistics and data and science. That's another. Some people are convinced by logic. Some people are convinced by emotion. Some people are convinced by trustworthiness. They just do what the experts say. Now, obviously, we use a combination of these things in our writing, but the point that Socrates is making is some people are persuaded by logic, that's data and science. Some people are persuaded by emotions, like fear and love, and some people are persuaded by trustworthiness. Can I trust the guy speaking to me? These are three different kinds of arguments. Ethos, pathos, and logos is the name of those. Logos is where you get logic from. Pathos is where you get... Actually, I don't know off the top of my head. And ethos is a very complicated word, but it means character, trustworthiness. And so these are different. And Socrates says, well, you better know about people so you know which kind of argument to use. Because some people, if a person's persuaded by emotion, you're going to want to use emotion. If a person's persuaded by science and data and logic, you're going to want to use science and data and logic. And if someone's persuaded by trustworthiness, then you're going to want to emphasize why you are an expert and should be trusted. And we use all of these things in our papers. In fact, the research paper, I'm asking you to find trustworthy experts, so we're using that. Okay, so these are all the same kind of techniques we would use in our classes. So Socrates thinks if you're going to teach speech writing, right, you better be able to understand all of these things, because you need to understand how to affect an audience. All right. As Phaedrus says, you've hit upon a very good way. And Socrates says, yes, that is the true and only way in which any subject can be set forth or treated by rules of art, whether in speaking or writing. But the writers of the present day, at whose feet you have sat craftily, conceal the nature of the soul, which they know quite well. Nor, until they adopt our method of reading and writing, can we admit that they write by the rules of art. So he's talking about Lysias. He says, Lysias, these guys are just tricking you. They don't really understand the soul. They don't really understand people. They don't really understand the truth. They just know how to trick you. They just trick you. And that's why they're not really doing it the right way. By the way, did you notice, is it just me or is this book getting easier? I kind of knew this was going to happen. I knew that the most difficult part, it's very hard to start this thing because it's exhausting and there's so much of it, and it's so serious and the vocabulary is difficult. And then you get to Socrates' massive speech, which is so fucking long in the middle of the book. But now that we're at the last third, we're kind of getting the hang of this. We've spent some time with these characters, and this is one of the most important things I'm going to teach you all semester long, which is that when you start reading something, it's often very difficult and you want to give up. But if you stick with it and just go a couple of pages, after a while it starts to make more sense. And every single page that makes a little bit of sense makes the next page easier, makes the next page easier, makes the next page easier. Because you start to get the hang of it. You start to be like, oh, you know what? I know what Socrates cares about. And so the fact that he's saying this, it makes perfect sense. Of course he's saying that you have to know the truth of things. Because I've spent so much time with Socrates at this point, I know exactly what he's doing. These things get easier. I find myself zipping through this faster because we're getting the hang of this. And this is a really crucial thing. Students love to give up when they read something because it's the first 3 pages are difficult. And so the student assumes if the first 3 pages are difficult, I'm sure as fuck not going to do this for 800 pages. But actually, once you get past the first 20 or 30 pages, you start to get the hang of it. And the remaining pages, no matter the more pages there are, the faster and faster they go, because the more and more you get. And there's a bigger point to make here too, which is that sometimes you'll read a book and it's very difficult. Like this one, we're reading Phaedrus by Plato. It's an extremely difficult book. But it's going to make the next book easier, and that'll make the next book easier, and that'll make the next book easier, and that'll make the next book easier. So it's not just that the Phaedrus gets easier as you go because you get used to it, but books in general, philosophy books get easier as you go. Academic books, school books, the more you do, the faster you can go. I had a teacher of mine once that said that every book you read is like putting a bucket of water in an empty pool. If you put 5 buckets of water in an empty pool, you can't go swimming in that. But if you put hundreds of buckets of water, then you can go swimming. And so it's a little bit like that, where every book you read may be difficult, but after a while, you got enough books that you can have fun with it. You can go swimming because you have a sense of how they work and the kinds of arguments that they make and the kinds of skills that you need to do that. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to give you a whole philosophy book to go through, because I think it really helps to kind of open doors on that front. Okay. All right. Doing good. All right, so the nature of the soul, and we got to classify different kinds of. So Phaedrus says, well, what's our method, right? He says, if Lysias is doing it wrong, what's the right way? Socrates says, I cannot give you the exact details, but I should like to tell you generally, as far as is in my power, how a man ought to proceed according to the rules of art. Art means skill, and the skill they're talking about is speech making. All right, let me hear. Socrates has this is kind of a big thing to go through, but he says, oratory is the art of enchanting the soul. Remember, oratory is giving speeches. Oratory is the art of enchanting the soul, and therefore, he who would be an orator has to learn the differences of souls. They are so many and of such a nature, and from them come the differences between man and man, right? Different people are distinguished by the different kinds of minds that they have. Actually, I'm going to really quick say this. You guys actually all do this. This is a kind of funny example. I don't know. This is true, though. I think this is right. You guys have all learned this thing probably this semester. Your professors are all different, and they want different things. I, for example, am very happy if you talk about yourself in your papers. Not all the time. You got to talk about Plato, but you could have examples that come from your own life and your own situation. But I bet you have other professors that if you use the word I in a paper, they'll lower your grade. They don't want you talking about yourself and your experience. They want you talking about the book they gave you. You have to learn what each professor wants separately. This drives students crazy. Couldn't all the professors get together and figure out some rules that would be true for all your college classes? But no, they don't. Each professor has his own little insane kingdom that he gets to run or she gets to run. And that person makes up their own rules. And then you have to, when you go into these classes, figure out each one separately. Because part of being a college student is understanding the nature of your professors, and figuring out this professor, you have to learn their souls, their mind, their psyche, to be like, this professor wants this, but this other professor wants something else. And then you have to make your writing look one way for this professor and another way for that professor. That is annoying. But it's a pretty important skill to think about how it's called code switching, is when you can kind of slightly change your language choices. Depending on the context, depending on the situation, just how you act a little differently among your friends, differently in a job interview, differently with your grandma, um, differently when you're in love. And so it's about kind of, you need to be able to kind of read the room, they say in acting class, and kind of think about what kind of speech different people need. So, all right, pick this up in the next video. I think we're going to finish page 20 today. It's very exciting.